Okay, I just made this video and then it got all screwed up, so let's try this again, shall we? I was just talking about day 3 of rehearsal, and we read through Act 2 today of Oliver, and if you're watching this and you really don't care about Oliver, that's all this is about. So, you're free to go on. I decided to start vlogging, to keep track of Nancy after I got an idea from Becca, who wants to make vlogs after every rehearsal that she's at. I feel like it's a better way for me to document my information that I find about her because I can see how I'm talking and the emotions on my face when I'm talking about it instead of writing it in words and trying to figure out what I was trying to say. Because I've had a habit of doing that. I'll think of something really great and then I'll forget it and I won't be able to distinguish what I wrote. And I don't have the best handwriting in the world. So I thought this was a really good idea. Um, we read Act 2 today, and in Act 2, I have considerably more lines than I did in Act 1. In Act 1, I'm in one scene, and I sing 2 songs, and I have like 10 lines, and then it's the end of the show, or of Act 1. So then Act 2, I start off with the song, and then I don't talk for a while, and then I have a little bit of a conversation with Bill, and then I have another song, and it's like, I interact more in Act 2, and then I interact with Bill, which I didn't get to do in Act 1. So I had my first read with Nolan today, and it was pretty interesting. He's this really nice guy, and he's a little socially awkward, but when he reads for Bill, his voice has already changed. He's got this deep, like, scary voice, and it's like, he's like, oh, blah, 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 I'm Bill Sykes, and blah, 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 and it's actually really scary when you wouldn't expect it, because he's like 2 inches shorter than me, so it's gonna be really hard. We have to work together really well to make this dynamic work, and I think it'll be great, because he's gonna be a great Bill Sykes, and everyone's saying I'm gonna be a good Nancy, and I hope that's true. By talking to Andrea a bit about Nancy today, we talked about dedicating the show, and I'm dedicating it to her because she's like my mother of sorts when it comes to theater and just in general. She's been there for me through a lot. I've known her for 3 years now, and it's she's just really close to me, and I wanted to dedicate it to her and to thank her for giving me this opportunity because I wanted Nancy more than anything, and I got it, and I feel like I'm going to shine here more than I did anywhere else, which is saying something because Annie in The Miracle Worker is a huge role I still try to live up to. I feel like I did well in Into the Woods, but people still remember me as Annie Sullivan, um, from The Miracle Worker, and less for The Baker's Wife or in Almost a Classic, which was the student show. I was Mrs. Capulet, and like that was a last minute change. I had 10 days to learn that role, so it's like my other characters are good, but I really want to live up to Annie, and Annie is where I learned to use the method, and she is one of my more intense characters, and Nancy is a lot more real, and she's a lot like Carmen was gritty, but it was a funny gritty. Nancy is a very real gritty, and she deals with very real issues. She deals with abuse, and Andrea was talking to me and saying that she thinks this is going to be strictly Stanislavski for me, but I'm a method actress, so that I am ready for that. And reading the script, I knew I have events in my life that I can relate to Nancy with, which isn't necessarily a good thing, but it's putting those things to good use, I suppose. So I'm really glad that they had some kind of meaning. And Nancy deals with a lot of controversial issues. She's an abused woman, and she continually goes back to Bill. Um, Bill hits her, and she sings the song As Long as He Needs Me. And Andrea said we were going to do so much character development for that song because she's singing that as long as Bill needs her, that she will love him because no one else could, but she can. And I haven't really started developing on that song yet because we've just started, but I expect to be talking about that song a lot. She told me that this was going to be the most intense psychology thing she thinks I've done for a character, and I did a lot of intense psychology for Annie because she was a real person. So Nancy not being a real person and having such intense issues to deal with is going to be a challenge, but one I think I am one of the most prepared for because I am a strict method actress and I get really into these roles, and I feel like I can really do a good job with them, and I think that might be why Andrea kind of picked me. She said there are a few reasons. One being my callback was really good, even though I didn't think it was. So, but the whole point is that my main thing today was she told me that my psychology and talking in the accent more are really going to help me become Nancy. And I have some more information here that I've got to think about. We talked a bit about status today because I was really interested in my relationship with Bill, obviously, but even more so, I'm interested in my relationship with Fagin. Well, not even more so, but Fagin and Bet are my other, and even Dodger are kind of my counterparts in the show. And Bet is my best friend, and she's played by a good friend of mine named Gina. And Bet doesn't have a lot of lines, but she's always with Nancy pretty much, and they're best friends. And we're gonna have to work really hard to develop those characters. I keep saying work really hard. We have to work really hard. All of us do. Um, but I have to work with Gina and establish a relationship there. And then I have to work with Drew, who's playing Fagin, who I've worked with both of them before. And I'm really interested with Fagin because Nancy is kind of considered the first lady of Fagin's gang. And she worked for Fagin, like she stole things for Fagin when she was really young, and she's been doing it for 12 years since. So um, she kind of lives this really rough life, and it's a fine life. She says, I rough it, I love it, life is game of chance. And sometimes she thinks about settling down with Bill, but she knows that's not for her, and she knows it will never happen, and she loves her life the way it is, even though it's a bit controversial. She's a criminal, and in Oliver Twist, I believe she's a prostitute, but that's not really so much touched upon here in this show. And then we were talking a bit about Nancy's status with Fagin, because this show is a lot of songs one after another, and there aren't a lot of actual lines without music. And we were talking about Nancy's relationship with Fagin, and how Fagin obviously has more power than she does, but Nancy, she's not really strong. She's a weak character. Obviously, she's in an abusive relationship, and I don't like to say that abused women are weak at all, but she's a kind of a stereotypical abused woman, and Andrea said she hated saying that, but she is, because she's in this abusive relationship, but she defends Bill, and she loves Bill, and she always goes back to Bill. And she's not really tough. She doesn't stand up for herself, except on like one occasion in the show, and Bill hits her for it. So, but with Fagin has more power. He's obviously in charge of the gang, and he's obviously a man, and he's older than Nancy, and he like taught her how to steal, so he has more power than she does. But I was talking to my director, and she has a higher status. And status in theater is when in a scene, it's like who seems like they have more power. And Nancy walks right into Fagin's apartment, place, whatever, basement or whatever that the boys live in, and she just starts like talking right away, and she says, "Where's the gin, Fagin?" And she just goes on doing what like she wants, and she has a bit of a higher status than Fagin. It's like Fagin has to go through her to get to Bill. In the movie, Bill sends Nancy to pick up the money. Uh, they send Nancy to check on Oliver when he goes to live with Mr. Brownlow. And you kind of have to go through Nancy to get to Bill, because nobody says Bill Sykes' name. Nobody talks to Bill Sykes. Bill Sykes is just the ultimate villain. And Nancy does a lot of his dirty work for him because she loves him, and that's her lifestyle. And so Fagin has to go through Nancy a bit to get to Bill. So her status is a bit higher than Fagin sometimes. And then other times it's flipped, and Fagin has more status, he has more power, he's a man. And but then Bill has the ultimate status over either of them, typically, it seems. Bill is just this big villain, and while Fagin and Nancy are criminals, and they're kind of villainous, they're really not the bad guys. They're protagonists, so there's that. But Andrea compared Nancy to the first lady to the president. You have to go through her to get to Bill. And then she said that Fagin had more power, but Nancy had higher status. So that was kind of what I learned about Nancy today. I'm very interested to see where this goes. Andrew told me how I'm going to have to delve into a lot of emotional stuff, and she said she can already think of things she knows about me that she's going to want to use for this, and I know we're going to have a lot of one-on-ones because Nancy has the most songs, and those songs have to be real and emotional, and I have to act through them. I can't just stand there and sing it pretty. So we will see where this goes. This video is almost 10 minutes long, but it's more for me than it is for you. But if you watched it, that's great, and it's going to be an intense journey, but I'd like to go through these at the end and see how far I came. So thank you. I hope you guys have a good night, and I'm gonna go.